and plays his pawn to c6. We have the Caro-Kann on the board. This must come as a surprise to Magnus. And he thinks for a bit here, and look at Magnus's clock as well. He's also come down to 14 minutes. So big surprise there for Magnus. And he plays his pawn to d4. And we have the proper Caro-Kann. Magnus goes for the exchange variation. ED, CD. Bishop comes out to d3. Richard plays his knight to f6. And now Magnus plays his pawn to h3. This is useful because if you play on knight out, there could be a pin. And he stopped that. Knight c6 attacking the pawn here. Magnus defends it with c3. And now he goes e5, takes, knight takes. So black has voluntarily gone for the isolated pawn here on d5. Queen e2 played, pinning here. It's not very common. And he goes knight e4. Very interesting move here by Richard, following the game between Wesley So and Firouzja. Because if takes, takes, queen takes, there's a pin, but bishop d6 comes, and if you try to win a piece with f4, then there's queen h4 check, and you can castle because now the pawn piece cannot be taken. So this is all opening preparation here by Richard. Rapport goes knight e4, bishop check by Magnus, and bishop d7 played. Once again, pushing the pawn to f3 is no good because of a check here. So that's the reason why he plays his knight out to f3. The players are still following this game. Knight g6 played here. That was also played in the game, and I believe here the move that was played in the game was bishop to g5. But Magnus goes bishop e3. So the first new move of the game played, and Richard plays his bishop to d6. He's happy with his position. He has a knight right into the center of the board. The pieces are well developed. The knight on g6 is well placed. But Magnus says, I also have the isolated d5 pawn to play against. Black quickly castles, and a logical thing now would be to take on d7 as the bishop is no longer pinned, and then you can castle it out as well. Magnus takes on d7. Good move there by him. And Richard Rapport will take back. Yes, he takes back on d7. And now short castle makes a lot of sense here, and the position is roundabout even, but Magnus goes rook d1. He's keeping his king in the center. He's trying for some tactics with knight e4, d4, and this pin on the d file. A good move for Rapport would be to play rook a e8. It's a useful move because later you can put your bishop back on b8, queen comes to c7, and then kind of create this battery on the long diagonal. But he plays rook f e8. His idea could be to place the other rook on c8 or d8. So rook f e8 played. And now Magnus Carlsen goes takes. And can you take on e4 with the pawn? You can, but he decides to take with the rook. Rook takes e4, and if you get very greedy with rook d5, there is a nice little fork waiting for you, so that's not going to work. Magnus goes knight g5, but Richard instantly plays knight f4, attacking the queen and the pawn. The game is sharpening up now because you can't take the knight, the queen is hanging, so he has to move the queen. He moves it to f3, and what a move by Richard Rapport here. Queen to b5. The very important point being that if knight e4, you have d4, and there's no way to protect the mate here. Even if you go queen g4, I have h5. Amazing. So Magnus goes g3. He attacks the knight. Everything's hanging. The rook is hanging. The knight is hanging. Wow, what a position we have. It's like fire on board, and that too on the 18th move. f6 played here. Fantastic chess by Richard, because if he had moved the knight, the f7 pawn was hanging. So he attacks Magnus's knight. If you take on f4, I'll take back here. He plays, he does take, and now f takes, and Richard quickly gets his rook on f8, attacking Magnus's queen. Magnus down to last few seconds. He's thought so much. His position looks so bad. Queen g2. This move, queen b5, was an absolute monstrous move, stopping white from castling. Now Richard thinks a bit. He's like, there are many different ways in which he can play for a win. Rook fe8, fantastic move there by him, pinning the bishop on e3 and threatening to sacrifice his rook. Queen f1 played by Magnus. And now there are many ways to win. One is to take and play check, king d2 and queen b2. This is winning for sure. But Richard takes on b2 first and now threatens to play rook takes e3 next, which is a complete bone crusher. Look at Nepo there. He can't believe that Magnus is losing. Rook d2 played in this position. And now many different ways. You can take on e3, you can take on c3. And as Richard is about to make his move, Magnus resigns. Richard was so kind there. He said it's okay, sort of a thing. Magnus was not in his element, but Richard played a fantastic game to take advantage of all his inaccuracies.